And now for more insights on the latest developments, we are joined by Mr. Alabbas F Alsudani, Schoening Scholar at the London School of Economics and Political Science, live from London. Thank you, sir, for joining us here on Asia One. Look, the International Energy Agency projects the first annual decline in global oil demand since 2020, largely due to tensions around the Strait of Hormuz. How significant is this forecast, and what does it tell us about the current state of global energy markets?
Good evening. Thank you for having me here again. Firstly, I need to set up a main important point due to the latest developments happening in the region. I have said 2 days ago that the tension currently in the region is a coercive bargaining more than a collapse for the MOU. However, due to these recent developments, I would say the coercive bargaining I mentioned itself, it evolved into more what I call a coercive diplomacy. The both sides now are not trying to redesign Islamabad memorandum, but to design a new kind of memorandum that will provide them more terms and conditions. That's been said, this whole situation is affecting the global market, of course, and you already mentioned that this is the first significant decline since COVID-19 in 2020, and that shows us that the Hormuz uncertainty is no longer seasonal; it is more structural. And here there are two distinct forces at play. What I call the supply side, firstly, which is the distributed Iranian exports threats to Gulf shipping and the insurance premiums up. Then what I call it demand side, the Asian economies preemptively rationing, denying industrial contracts and seeking alternative sources. However, the global energy market is no longer now, the whole situation is no longer a threat to the Middle East stability. It's way beyond that. Hormuz choke point carries roughly 20% of the global traded oil and 25% of the LNG. Before the war, there were 110 vessels daily go through Hormuz. Now it's roughly 15, and with the Iranian permission. So the deeper story could be that this is not just about volumes. This is not just about shortage. It's about the predictability of the global market, and it is a crisis that the whole world need to cooperate to get through it and to re-enhance the global market again.
Look, with crude tankers reportedly stranded for months because of security risks in the Strait of Hormuz, how vulnerable are global energy supply chains if tensions continue to rise?
Well, extremely vulnerable. This is something very obvious, and this vulnerability is, again, it's structural. It's not temporary. Even if the problem is resolved, the whole world need to think about the future and how they avoid such a problem, such a pitfalls in the future if something happens. So generally, in the whole region, or I would say in the linking geopolitical geography of the world, there are three main choke points globally: Hormuz Strait, Bab el-Mandeb Strait, and the Suez Canal. And if we look at this war, Hormuz Strait is already under control. Bab el-Mandeb Strait is, I would call it, under controlled choke point, because if the Iranian want to play with Bab el-Mandeb, they can just move their proxies, the Houthis specifically, and they can close these two straits. And if they close these two straits, the damage will rise from 25% to approximately 48 to 50%. And we don't have yet main capable alternatives. So, for example, we have the UAE, the Emirates, Habshan, Fajriya pipeline, which only has capacity constraints, and we have the Saudi Arabia's East-West pipeline, but this one can only carry 5 million barrels per day, but Gulf output, way higher than that. We have the upcoming development road project of Iraq, and this is not on the ground yet. So we don't even have alternatives. So the vulnerability is real, is structural, not temporary. And again, the whole world need to now. Actually, this problem now is exposing the pitfalls of the whole global market. So after the problem resolves, the whole world will need, and they will get to redesign the whole global market economy routes.
Let's continue with Asia here. Well, Asia has recorded the sharpest drop oil in consumption, with China particularly affected. Which economies are likely to bear the greatest economic cost if disruption the Strait of Hormuz persists? What's your take on this?
Well, interesting. And this let us think in a bit engineering way. So if I classify them, I would classify the powers or the states that are affected to three tiers. So tier one, the most exposed, I would say China, because you know China imports roughly 55% of its crude oil through Hormuz. Then I would say Japan, which more than 80% of oil imports through Hormuz. South Korea, India as well. So most of the main Asian powers. Then the tier two is I would put it like this, significantly exposed entities. The European Union, particularly Southern Europe, Italy, Spain, Greece, heavily depend on Gulf and North African supplies, and you know Hormuz is there. But what tier three is the most ironic point, ironically less exposed, is the US, the United States of America, because the exporter since 2019, US tend to be more exporter than importer because of their oil policy. But the global prices affect the US inflation, so it's not directly affected. But however, the fact that the US is the less exposed to this closure gives us a hint or a signal about the continuity of the war. Maybe because they are less exposed, they continue the war and they are bargaining and bluffing even more.
And look, well, Iran says its armed forces are maintaining heightened surveillance along its coast and around the Strait of Hormuz, as we know. How should the international community interpret this, primarily as a defensive measure here, or is this a signal of continued strategic pressure?
Well, I think what Alabbas, the parliament speaker and Iran's chief negotiator, said this week is the answer for this question. He mentioned, literally, I'm quoting, only these prepared for war can negotiate with the United States. And that shows us at the doctrine of Iran. It's not a rhetoric thing. It's the doctrine, the military and the political doctrine of Iran. So I would say it's both. And actually, I would look at Iran that it's doing three things with the Hormuz posture. Firstly, it's defensive, then it's coercive, then it's political. So how the defensive position of Iran is to legitimate the concern that US or Israel forces could strike the coastal assets as they did on July 7 and 9. So they are taking this defensive position. Then coercive, which is, again, I mentioned that already, the coercive, what I call it coercive diplomacy, which is part of the bargaining and to redesign a new deal. And political, which is the political position, which is demonstrating more internal legitimacy and establishing this political capacity to deal with the whole situation, linking the domestic level with the international level and getting the domestic legitimacy to support the international level. So it's both of what you mentioned.
Mr. Alsudani, thank you so much for such a detailed and insightful take and analysis. We appreciate your time here on Asia One.